Hello, I'm Greg Harradine. In this video, I'm going to discuss how I composed Epiphany over dark waters, the first of my Caledonian portraits, and how it was inspired by this incredible painting, Blue Clouds by Kirstie Cohen. Now, before you watch any further, please do take just 1 second to click that red button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Caledonian Portraits is a series of 8 solo piano pieces I'm composing, inspired by the work of 8 different painters, poets and other artists living and working in Scotland today. These pieces will be shared here on YouTube, and I will then perform all 8 pieces in a special concert at the beautiful Paxton House in March 2023. If there are any linguists watching, then you may possibly have noticed that I'm not actually Scottish. But I do live in Scotland. My wife and I moved here in March 2020, and this project is my way of celebrating the huge diversity of artistic talent here in our newly adopted homeland. The first of my Caledonian portraits is inspired by the work of Scottish painter Kirstie Cohen. Her emotive landscapes fuse the geographical with the intensely psychological. I'm a huge fan of her work, and I was lucky enough to interview Kirstie over the phone, which really helped to inform my composition. So let's get into it. Take a look at this stunning oil painting. Clouds and light vie for prominence over an inky sea, in which a strange disturbance seems to be taking place. Kirstie's painting grabbed me powerfully as soon as I saw it, hence the opening of my piece. A fortissimo G minor chord low down in the bass, coming out of nowhere. The soft melody which emerges over uncertain chords is drawn from the mysterious blue cloud mentioned in the painting's title, hovering on the right of the canvas. At various points in the music, we hear the cloud meet the bright, blazing light on the left in a suddenly louder chord or phrase, for example in bar 7, and at the end of bar 12. The painting at times seems to have a quiet stillness, and at other times to exude a powerful energy. And so from bar 15, the main theme is developed with greater urgency and dynamism, to contrast with the softer preceding bars. By the way, if you're interested in owning the sheet music, it is available for immediate purchase and download. Just follow the link in the video description below. When we reach the 7/4 section at bar 23, the shifting insistent bass pattern is my way of symbolising the potentially threatening disturbance in the dark water. What is going on there? Is this disturbance benign or malevolent? I think the viewer is left guessing, and I tried to keep the listener guessing too. It seems to me that there is an undefinable poignancy in Kirstie's painting, in the relationship between the amorphous, unsettling cloud and the resplendent, brazen light. They are interacting with each other, but not touching, at odds with, but dependent on each other. Not contradicting, but perhaps complementing each other. Fire and water, light and darkness, Apollo and Dionysus, yin and yang. In bars 34 to 51, I tried to summon up this otherworldly poignancy and symbiosis between the two elemental forms. This isn't the moment to discuss the age-old debate of absolute music versus program music, or to put it another way, pure music versus music with a story to tell. But when I compose pieces like this, I try to do more than just creating a piece of so-called program music. I like to use the term musical ekphrasis to describe my approach. I first came across this term in the fascinating book of the same name by Siglind Brunn. Ekphrasis is traditionally a verbal or written description of a visual object, say a work of art. This goes right back to the ancient Greeks. But a more modern example, relatively speaking, is the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn by John Keats. In musical ekphrasis, a composer tries to portray many aspects of a work of art through music. Not just the visual, but maybe the psychological valence of the artwork, or some elements of the history behind the artwork, or some of the techniques the artist used to create it. One example of how I used musical ekphrasis here in my piece is at a climactic moment when things come to a head in bars 55 to 60. In my interview with Kirstie Cohen, she revealed that, as well as using brushes, she also uses a palette knife to apply paint directly to the canvas in order to create specific textures. Here in my composition, the series of running octaves represents the hard, sharp palette knife applying paint directly to the canvas, as opposed to the softer brush used elsewhere. Now, here's a question I'm sure you're dying to ask. Why is my piece called Epiphany over Dark Waters? Well, in one way, it's obvious. The title is a written description of Kirstie's painting, an example, no less, of ekphrasis. But there are other reasons I settled on this title. There are, in fact, 2 epiphanies in my piece. Listeners might find more, perhaps, but the ones I've consciously composed as epiphanies can be found in bars 43 to 44, and 67 to 68. I've adopted the word epiphany in the same sense that James Joyce used it. If you've followed me on YouTube for a while, you may already know that I'm a little obsessed with James Joyce. In Joyce's sense, an epiphany refers to a visionary moment when a character has a sudden insight that changes their understanding of themselves or their comprehension of the world. He first used the term epiphany in his novel Stephen Hero, an early version of a portrait of the artist as a young man. Stephen's epiphanies are moments of heightened poetic perception. The word epiphany, used in the Joycean sense, seems to encapsulate what I was trying to achieve in these climactic moments. A sense of seeing the painting in a suddenly new light, a moment of heightened perception in the music, a major chord shining out among the obscurity of other dark harmonies. From epiphany, we move to dark waters. The phrase dark waters I use in my title gives it, to my ears, a faintly biblical flavour, and adds a sense of the mystical, which seems evident to me in the painting. After coming up with my title, I did a bit of Googling and discovered this Bible verse from early on in Genesis. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters. So in that quote, we have darkness, we have waters. I'm not religious, but aspects of that quote do seem pertinent to Kirstie's painting, and to the mood I was aiming for in my composition. The main theme returns in bar 60 in a new key, C minor instead of G minor. It soon modulates to the relative major, climbing apparently inexorably towards the tonic E-flat major. But what do we get instead? G major. This surprise G major chord leads us briefly back into C minor before things look set to end surely in G minor, the original key of the piece. But no, the final chord is not G minor, but instead, once again, G major. The question is answered. The painting is in no way malevolent, but rather benevolent. At least that's how I see it. All this toying around with modulations and major to minor contrasts is my way of mirroring the sense of light and darkness that are at odds in Kirstie's painting. The light is resplendent, and yet it doesn't appear to be defeating the darkness. And the darkness of the cloud and of the sea isn't necessarily threatening. It is rather almost preternatural. The whole scene is beyond normality. It is a heightened moment, an epiphany. Kirstie Cohen describes her paintings as being an abstract response or an emotional response to landscapes she has seen or imagined. And that is what I hope to capture in my piece, an intensely emotional representation of her glorious painting. I often feel, frankly, like giving up when attempting to write or talk about music, because so much in music and in art in general is ineffable. There are no words adequate to describe Kirstie's painting. It should simply be looked at and felt. Yet I hope this video has cast a few dim rays of light onto Kirstie's painting and onto my composition too. To find out more about Kirstie's amazing artwork, visit kirstiecohen.co.uk. Once again, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you like what I'm doing, you could even become a supporter on Patreon, where I will share the sheet music and audio of my new compositions with you each month, and much more. I'll leave all the important links in the video description below. I would also like to thank Creative Scotland and my Patreon supporters for funding my Caledonian Portraits project. Let me sign off with a quote from Kirstie herself, which I think perfectly sums up not only her own artistic approach, but also how we interact with all genuine works of art. My subject matter is only a springboard, a starting point for a journey, taking one into unknown territory.